The crystal glass chimed sharply against the silver fork. Cutting through the low hum of conversation, my sister, Kara, stood at the head of the mahogany table, radiating the kind of aggressive benevolence that only a narcissist can muster during the holidays. She smoothed her silk dress, her eyes scanning the 20 family members gathered in the dining room, before landing squarely on me. I was standing near the doorway, holding a store-bought pie because she had explicitly told me not to bother with cooking. There were no empty chairs left at the main table. Oh, look who finally made it, Kara announced, her voice pitched high enough to ensure the entire room fell silent. She gestured vaguely toward a folding metal chair set up near the kitchen swinging door, distinct from the heavy oak chairs everyone else occupied. Grab that seat, would you, and try not to look so sour. Smile. You're just visiting. We want happy memories in this house. Her husband, Dave, let out a short, sharp laugh. My cousins looked down at their plates, scraping gravy with their forks. To avoid eye contact, the implication was clear. I was the outsider, the black sheep who had been away in the city for 5 years, presumably failing, while Kara played the role of the dutiful daughter who stayed behind to manage the family estate. I didn't frown, I didn't argue, I didn't storm out. Which is exactly what she wanted instead. I walked over to the metal chair, unfolded it with a deliberate calmness, and sat down. Happy to be here, Kara, I said, my voice steady. She blinked, disappointed by the lack of drama, then turned back to her audience to continue her toast about legacy and keeping the family home alive. I sat in silence, watching the performance. For the last 6 months, I had been a ghost to them. I hadn't returned calls. I hadn't updated my social media. And I hadn't explained where I was living to Kara. This silence was proof of my failure. She assumed I was broke, drifting, and desperate for a free meal. She didn't know that my silence was actually the sound of a closing trap. The dinner progressed with Kara micromanaging every bite. She scolded her aunt for using the wrong fork and loudly reminded our father not to spill wine on her tablecloth. Our parents sat on either side of her, looking diminished. They were smaller than I remembered. Their shoulders hunched, their eyes tired. They ate quickly, as if they were afraid the food would be taken away when the main course was cleared. Kara stood up again. Before dessert, she said, clasping her hands, Dave and I have an announcement. Since we've been taking care of the house and mom and dad for so long, we've decided it's time to make things official. We're going to be starting renovations next month to turn the east wing into a master suite for us. It's a big project, but this is our forever home, after all. She looked at me, a smirk playing on her lips. So, if you were planning on crashing in the guest room for a few weeks, you'll need to find a hotel. Guests don't dictate the renovation schedule. That was a signal. I reached into the inner pocket of my blazer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. I didn't stand up, I didn't raise my voice. I simply slid the envelope across the polished wood. It spun perfectly, coming to a stop directly in front of Kara's wine glass. What is this? She asked, her nose wrinkling as if I had served her trash. It's the renovation schedule, I said calmly, and the eviction notice. The room went dead. Silent. Kara laughed, a nervous, fractured sound. Is this a joke? You can't afford a lawyer, let alone a renovation. Open it, I said. She ripped the envelope open, pulling out the documents with aggressive force. As her eyes scanned the top page, the color drained from her face so fast it looked painful. Her hands began to shake, rattling the paper. This says sold, she whispered, October. What is this? I bought the house, Kara, I said, leaning back in my metal chair. Mom and Dad were facing foreclosure 6 months ago. They didn't tell you because they knew you'd shame them for their bad investments. They called me. I paid off the bank. I bought the deed. And I let them stay here rent-free under the condition that they didn't tell you until I arrived. Kara spun toward her parents. Mom, is this true? Mom nodded, tears welling in her eyes. He saved us. Kara, we were going to lose everything. You and Dave never offered to help with the bills. You just moved in. Kara turned back to me, her face twisting into a mask of pure rage. You can't do this. I live here. I have rights. Actually, I said, pointing to the second document in her hand. You have a 30-day notice to vacate, which I'm serving you personally right now. Since you're just visiting, I assumed you wouldn't mind packing up. Guests don't dictate the ownership, Kara. Dave stood up, looking ready to shout, but I cut him off. The police have already been notified that I'm taking possession of the property today. You can finish your pie, but then I need your keys. Kara looked at the head of the table, then at me. The power had shifted so violently the air felt thin. She wasn't the matriarch anymore. She was a squatter in a tailored dress. She didn't finish her pie. She threw the papers down, grabbed her purse, and stormed out the front door, Dave trailing behind her like a lost puppy. The slam of the heavy oak door echoed through the hall, signaling the end of her reign. I stood up, folded the metal chair and leaned it against the wall. Then, I walked to the head of the table, picked out the wine bottle, and refilled my father's glass. Now, I said, looking at the family who had watched me in silence for years. Does anyone else have anything to say about the seating chart? Nobody did. I took the seat at the head of the table. Finally, I smiled. I was home.